Hello and welcome to Foreign Policy Focus. This is episode 129 and I am the show's host Kyle. On this episode of Foreign Policy Focus, I'm going to be answering some questions from the private Facebook group for the show Foreign Policy Focus. So if you're ever interested in asking questions, and I may do another Q&A show again if everybody enjoys it, you could request to join that Facebook group going to Facebook, it's just searching Foreign Policy Focus, and I will admit you to that group. The show could be found at thelibertarianinstitute.org. It's right there on the homepage underneath the Scott Horton Show. But just by the way, the Libertarian Institute's a great place to check out if you're interested in this foreign policy news. I know Scott is trying to incorporate a lot of the other things going on in the state that in libertarian beliefs, but there is a lot of good content on that website if you're interested in the foreign policy stuff, so definitely go check that out. The page for the show is foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, and it could be found on Facebook. The page is the Libertarian Union. So the first question I got is from Trey Weaver, who is actually the host of, I believe, the Subversion webcast. I might have called it the Subversion podcast in the past. Trey asked a question about Yemen, specifically what do the two developments, that being the death of former President Salah and Trump's demand that Saudi Arabia at least ease the humanitarian blockade of Yemen, what kind of difference is that going to make, and what can we see as the outcomes from that? So I think I've definitely talked about both of these incidents on the show in the past, but just for a brief catch-up. Right at the beginning of December, the former president of Yemen, Salah, broke his 2-year alliance, or 3-year alliance with the Houthis, which is a group of Zaidi Shia from northern Yemen. And they all got together and were able to take the capital city of Yemen and hold a large portion of Yemen, while the Saudi government waged a war against them. That alliance was broken, then Salah lost the war against the Houthis, even though he was able to turn back and ally himself with the former enemies, the Saudi Arabia, and gained some air support from Saudi Arabia in his final days. He was assassinated, killed, and now the remnants of his loyalists are fighting against the Houthis, as well as fighting with some alliance with the Hadi government in South Yemen, as well as Saudi Arabia. And then what Trump did a few days after this, and not really in response to anything, but just saying that, hey, there's a famine. Well, he didn't say there's a famine going on in Yemen, but said that Saudi Arabia should lift their humanitarian blockade in northern Yemen. What Trump is talking about here is allowing the import of aid ships into the port of Hodeidah and then the Sana'a airport, which I believe Saudi Arabia bombed again in the fighting going on between the Salah and the Houthis. So at this point, I don't even know what condition the Sana'a airport is even in and how much aid they could possibly get into the country. I'm imagining that these big cargo planes that bring in the aid typically require a pretty sizable runway that's pretty heavy duty. And if Saudi Arabia has bombed the runway or has hurt the capabilities of the Sana'a airport to kind of operate the facility they would need in order to land these planes here, could be a real problem for importing aid into Yemen. The big thing, though, is the port of Hodeidah, which is Houthi-controlled and has been blockaded from receiving humanitarian aid since the Houthis partnered with Salah, launched a missile at the Riyadh airport. I believe that was pretty early in the month of November. That's where, these big aid ships will come in, offload thousands of tons of flour and other, vaccines or whatever. And this is really what would help. The problem is that aid only accounts for a small portion of the, cargo that Yemen needs to survive. As much food aid as world relief programs are able to provide, the better way to get food into Yemen is by trade. This starts first with allowing the bank, the central bank of Yemen that is now located in Aden to, finance some of these major loans and stuff needed to bring in cargo and fuel and, food and fuel and stuff to Yemen. However, I believe the people of Yemen could pay for food, aside from that, just with either what they're making, selling some kind of products overseas. Of course, you got, some oil in Yemen and other exports. And so the people of Yemen are looking to import and pay for food, but Saudi Arabia isn't allowing this to come in. And even if the Saudis bent to Trump's wishes and allowed aid to start coming in, the real thing that they need is for, Saudi Arabia just allow all kinds of food and fuel, whether it be aid or traded, come into Yemen, and that way the people could get fed. The people to death in Yemen are starving right now, and this is in part because of the death of Salah and the increased airstrikes and fighting around the capital of Sana'a. It's very hard for people to leave their homes because they risk being shot in the streets or bombed And also, I'm guessing that there's not a whole lot for sale at the market. I'm guessing it's very, very expensive. Also, there's no fuel getting into Yemen right now, so it's very hard for generators to run at hospitals and water treatment facilities, and for people to be able to transport themselves to markets, to hospitals, whatever kind of immediate things they need to stay alive just for the next few days. So what does this mean for Yemen going forward? It isn't very good. As somebody living in North America, I can't really say what the Yemeni people want or what the Yemeni people need. However, it does seem like Salah taking power and then driving the Houthis out of the capital city would have been a situation where we would have had some aid be able to reach the capital city there, and Saudi Arabia probably would have eased airstrikes on the city. And this could have been nice for people who have been living under terror for nearly the past 3 years now, going back even further really with all the different wars and things that have been going on in Yemen. However, with the Houthis winning that split between Salah and the Houthis, this creates a real problem, because now Saudi Arabia, who the one enemy they definitely have in Saudi Arabia, it wasn't Salah, it's not Hadi, it's not Al-Qaeda and ISIS, it's the Houthis in northern Yemen, and that's because they're Shia. And for whatever reason, I think that initially the war was started by Prince Mohammed bin Salman under the false pretenses that the Houthis were allied with Iran, and this allowed him to start that war that he thought he was going to brilliantly wage as this stunning new defense minister at the age of 29 comes in and wins a major victory for Sunni Islam against Iran in Yemen. But that's absolutely not what happened. The whole thing is blown up in his face. And now, while, the point of the war was probably really just, build up the reputation of Mohammed bin Salman, he cannot give up this war. And since he's now Saudi's crown prince and more or less de facto leader, if the Houthis controlled northern Yemen, it seems really, really unlikely that the Saudis are going to give up their war unless they're absolutely forced to. And that could only happen by the United States saying no to it. And, if we look at what Trump did by telling Saudi Arabia to allow the humanitarian aid, the Saudis have ignored him. So it doesn't look like the Trump administration is going to take a stand against Saudi Arabia on the whole Yemen thing. So conditions in Yemen, I expect them to get much, much worse. I'm kind of still just sitting by and hoping either, to be involved in the creation of, or to see this moment happen when everybody will realize, oh my God, the situation in Yemen is so terrible that 7 million people are about to starve to death. We instantly have to make demands and do something. And then the tides of the war change and people get fed and people get vaccinations and they start treating the water for cholera. And the situation in Yemen goes from, just trying to survive to rebuilding. And while that could happen very quickly, and I keep, anticipating that must happen, because are we really going to let all these people starve to death? But it just doesn't seem to be coming. So Trey, I don't think that the outlook is very good right now for Yemen, but all we could do is keep spreading the message and hope something catches fire. Question 2 from Adam, and he asked about the Israeli move, specifically what is happening with Trump's Israeli announcement. So just kind of the bare bones of what's going on is that back in the mid-1990s, the United States Congress passed some kind of law that says that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. However, the president could grant a 6-month waiver on this. And ever since, the president has always signed the 6-month waiver. And I guess often that waiver was signed without much fanfare. However, with the Donald Trump administration, everything is a big deal. And so Trump decides that he's not going to sign this waiver. And then the United States will then recognize Israel as the capital of Jerusalem. Now, I believe he signed the waiver as he said this. So basically he said that the official thing would happen in 6 months or so. In the meantime, the United States Embassy will move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now, all the experts on this are kind of making it sound like this is going to be a couple-year process. I think there's going to be a lot of security involved, a lot of scrutiny involved. I mean, just imagine trying to pit the site here. If the U.S. Embassy is built on maybe once Palestinian land, this is going to be a huge scandal and a really big problem. However, I'm guessing that there are some who are looking to provoke outrage among Palestinians in order to provoke a Israeli move at additional suppression and confiscation of the Palestinian land, Sheldon Adelson. And So I think there's a lot of concern here as to what could come out of this move. However, it seems like in the medium term or in the short term, we're going to get a lot of protesting, a lot of rioting, stuff like that. In the medium term, I think a lot of this resistance will start to subside. I think protesting will continue in places like Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. All these countries have a huge amount of Palestinian refugees in their population. And so, we'll continue to see protests, but nothing, I think, on the terms of some of the predictions, like a third intifada or some of these, like the Middle East is going to be set on fire and not go out. Now, when the move actually happens, that may be more or less the trigger. I think to an extent with Trump saying, well, we're going to wait another 6 months. There's always that possibility that he just continues to sign the waiver and this is just typical Trump antics. So I think until we get like kind of a concrete plan of this is exactly when the United States will move its embassy to Jerusalem, and I'm sure to big fanfare we'll have some kind of ceremony recognizing the capital there. Now, the big, I guess, news behind this announcement, and one of the reasons I'm guessing that it's not going to be a huge deal is so the idea here is that the movement and the recognition of the capital is that Jerusalem, prior to the Camp David Accords and the 67 agreement and everything, I think Jerusalem was supposed to be either an international capital or the capital of Palestine or a shared capital. However, with the United States recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, it more or less acknowledges that the two-state solution isn't there and that the Palestinians are really just a third-tier class in the Israeli state. So that's kind of why I think of that and then where it's going. Ryan asks, what does Trump have to gain by making this move? This is the most curious part to me, is what Trump has to gain. I guess to speculate, I think we could look at a lot of different ways. One is that the Kushner family has been very involved in Israeli settlement expansion, especially around the city of Jerusalem. So it could just be personal reasons. I mean, maybe Kushner's very persuasive in telling Donald Trump that these Palestinians are these terrible people and we really need to give the Jews the capital city here and allow them to rule over everybody else and give them this authority. Or I don't know how Kushner could possibly explain, but that is a possibility just knowing Kushner's positions. Other than that, it's hard to see, I guess, a way that this turns out positive for Trump. If you look at what's going on in Turkey, Erdogan has come out, the leader of Turkey has come out as being the harshest critic of this move in the Arab world, maybe aside from the speaker of the Lebanon parliament, the leader of Hezbollah, the king of Jordan, and then the leader of the Palestinians, and then the leader of Hamas. All those individual groups who've had a huge invested interest have come out strongly against this. But Erdogan, who's not even a ruler of an Arab state, has come out very critical of Netanyahu. And so I think there's a couple possibilities for this. I think one, it's probably pretty good red meat for Erdogan to come out harsh against this. He's really trying to rally his base and to gain a lot of support there. And I think his popular support, White kind of sees himself as maybe a popular or a populist Islamist, where he kind of drives the popular ideas, the popularized ideas there, and kind of has that kind of Trumpian movement going on there in Turkey. One of the ways he's doing this is to rally his people against the Kurds and the PKK that exists along the Syrian border in Turkey. And certainly this is, if he continues to rally his base, this could be something he uses to gain their support. One of the interesting jabs traded between Trump and Erdogan, I've seen this happen 3 or 4 times, is Erdogan will criticize the Israeli treatment of the Palestinians, and then Netanyahu will criticize the Turkish treatment of the Kurds. And, sometimes Netanyahu's the one that starts it, sometimes Erdogan's the one that starts it. But it's very interesting that both of these countries exist with the same exact problems, yet they could criticize the other without any real looking into it at all. Other things is, I think this is really going to create a problem for Saudi Arabia. Now, I've been looking at this and kind of scratching my head, wondering if this is going to be a problem. And for the first time today, I saw some confirmation of it, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. And that is, how are the jihadists going to react to Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman's moves within Saudi Arabia? One of the things that people talk about is that he's kind of a reformer of the Islamist Saudi Arabian state. They're talking about opening movie theaters, and that's there. They've had same-sex concerts in Saudi Arabia. And so if, the people who actually believe in the bin Ladenist ideals, the jihadist ideals, are going to be upset by this kind of thing. And then I'm sure that they're not going to be very happy about Mohammed bin Salman's relative silence on the whole issue going on right now in Israel and not standing up for the Palestinians more than they have. So I think these are a couple problems that Saudi Arabia is definitely going to face moving forward. Another thing that we have going on for Trump is so why it doesn't make any sense he's doing. We already saw today in New York, we have a guy with a pipe bomb that apparently maybe blew his own arm off, and that's just about it. So lucky story there that some guy with a bomb on New York subway only kills a limb, but it could have been an awful lot worse. And I expect to see that this is the type of move that could really radicalize some of the crazies. And I think somebody once described it as driving the crazies crazy. And so the people who are very extremist and fundamentalist will look at these kind of events and see them as signs that they must act. So the one thing I cannot figure out, unless it's the Kushner play, is, really what Trump's motivation is here, Ryan. Trey asks, why does Israel need to be where it is? And this is a question that goes back a long, long ways, and I'm not very well versed on the creation of Israel or anything like that. I will say one of the problems with Israel is that it keeps expanding where it is. If we look at 2017, 460 Palestinian structures have been destroyed with over 600 people being displaced. And some of those people were displaced because family members, I guess, were members of Hamas or somebody who committed acts of crimes. And so the Palestinians will come in and destroy the family home. Or the Israelis will come and destroy the Palestinian family home. Last question, that is Will asked about Zimbabwe, and he says, what's going on there? And so far, it kind of seems like this situation is moving along a little bit better than expected. I haven't read any credible stories of any major rioting or protesting. And so until I hear some new news, I really don't have much to say. I guess maybe the absence of news doesn't always mean that the situation's calm, but in this case, I don't know what else, conclusion to draw other than the fact that I haven't seen any rioting, protesting, or major suppression. It looks like maybe Mugabe was really that unpopular in Zimbabwe at the time he left, and people are just kind of content with him being whisked away and the new leader, who's probably not any better than in many ways, taking charge. One more thing I want to update, and this is the most embarrassing thing, and the media sucks so bad, man. So I guess I'll get off on this little tangent first. Yesterday I spent like an hour and a half watching TV news because I think it's important that I check it out a little bit. And man, is it a hard pill to swallow though sometimes. Anyways, for the majority of it, they're talking about the Me Too moment kind of stuff. And I'm going to leave my commentary on that aside. Other than to say that if people are all about these moral outrages and want to talk about them, can somebody please talk about Yemen? I mean, I could see that all of this is extremely important and that, women are harassed in the United States. Not getting into that debate and that drawing attention to it, it's a great thing. But there's also millions of people about to starve to death. And so if you could just spend a little bit of your time talking about that as well as all the harassment stuff, I think it would be really important. And I think also that would go to give some legitimacy, because there is a huge difference between a genocide and, somebody kissing somebody. Like, let's be honest and put things in perspective sometimes. So anyways, what we have is the CNN releasing a bombshell story that Wikileaks offered the Hillary Clinton DNC leads to the Donald Trump administration prior to Wikileaks having that information, or prior to Wikileaks releasing that information to the public. Now, I don't know what this would have proved anyways, but maybe the word collusion, which means absolutely nothing other than scary things Russia does, would be bantered about. But anyways, so they released this bombshell story, and then it turns out it's not a bombshell story, and CNN just got the date on the email wrong. The actual date of the email was September 14th, which means that the email was sent to the Trump administration after WikiLeaks had already published it. So this, can't mean anything. And apparently it wasn't even somebody that was like kind of an authorized representative of WikiLeaks anyways. It was just this guy who sent Donald Trump Jr. an email saying you should really pay attention to the DNC WikiLeaks thing going on, and that's in the news. And that's not a story. It's just not important. But they spent all day talking about it, well, and so they, now they've done their retractions and people are kind of embarrassed. But how do you get that wrong? I mean, this was, they missed they missed the date. The significance of the story was that the date of the email was prior to the release of the WikiLeaks email drops, and it just absolutely wasn't the truth. So, man, do they have a lot of egg on their face this time. And look, I'm not saying that CNN is fake news because I think Fox News is real news. I'm saying that CNN is fake news, and so is Fox News. And had Fox News covered the Benghazi thing right, then we would have had the exposure of the actual scandal, which was Obama in Syria giving weapons from jihadists in Libya to jihadists in Syria. And this was a real scandal and a real problem that could have been exposed by the investigation into the Benghazi incident in 2012. However, the stupid Republicans and the stupid people at Fox News couldn't decipher the real news story, and all that, couldn't critique Hillary Clinton on her defense policy, but were absolutely willing to go after her because they thought she wasn't incompetent or wasn't sending the troops that they needed, and she wasn't hawkish enough. So just I don't know. It's absolutely amazing how they get all these things wrong, and they never talk about the things that are genocides and whatnot, the real important things. So anyways, I'm gonna keep talking about it on this show. foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, thelibertarianinstitute.org, on Facebook at The Libertarian Union. Foreign Policy Focus is a private Facebook group at KYAAALE on Twitter. iTunes, leave me a rating and review. Share the show, everybody. Help the show to grow. And I will see you on Wednesday. Oh, I just like to note that I know that I'm getting the shows out late. They were doing some construction, the apartment above mine. Hopefully that's over and the shows will be a little bit more timely. Thanks, everyone.